images etched forever in the memories of those who served there. The war itself was unlike anything the American military was prepared for. In Vietnam, there was no front line drawn on a map, no neatly marked strips of defenses behind which was enemy territory and safe territory. To avoid American firepower, the enemy used hit-and-run tactics, disappearing into the countryside to avoid annihilation. And although the fighting in the South was at once war, Vietnam introduced many innovations to the modern battlefield. But one weapon in particular shaped the fighting and became a symbol for the entire war: the helicopter. For those who served or observed, the chopper was a weapon of power and a symbol of futility, like the war itself. Adapted to several new roles that this war had created. It became a troop-carrying weapons platform that could seek out and attack enemy targets on its own, using new weapons like rockets and the minigun. Patrolling high above the rivers and the jungles of the Nam, it could unleash a storm of destruction on its target below. With its ability to insert troops onto an LZ, extract them under fire, move many troops and their equipment hundreds of miles to attack a distant enemy position, the chopper impacted the U.S. forces in Vietnam more than any other single weapon. Officially dubbed the air assault doctrine, from the moment it appeared over the skies of Vietnam, the chopper's rock and roll firepower struck fear into the hearts of its enemies. Euphemistically called fire suppression, it was better known as busting caps by the grunts. Busting caps on a fire support mission, or carrying troops, or scouting ahead on a ground column. It was the VC's worst nightmare and biggest threat. Carrying their artillery and supplies deep into the bush maintained the American advantage of superior firepower. With its many different weapon configurations, its combat firepower made it an aerial tank. Versatile, dangerous, and incredibly mobile, the chopper quickly gained in importance and soon dominated the tactical thinking of the American High Command. Still, the unforeseen conditions of Vietnam found the American military unprepared for this guerrilla war. No front lines, no secure areas, no way to tell who the enemy was. The VC wore no uniforms. When pursued, the fleeing Viet Cong melted away, often into an elaborate tunnel system which was interconnected to miles of underground passageways. By expending manpower, of which the North had virtually a limitless supply, the communists imposed a condition on the Americans which could only be met by money and manpower. But Vietnam was a war that did not end in a military victory for the U.S. The Americans had become strangers in a strange land.
Gentlemen, I will give you a brief rundown on our present status in Vietnam, together with a thumbnail sketch of the initial landings and subsequent buildup. parallel divides North Vietnam from South Vietnam. Militarily speaking, South Vietnam is divided into 4 areas. The 4th Corps area in the south, the 3rd Corps, the 2nd Corps, and in the north, the 1st Corps, or as we call it, the I Corps area. The area within this I Corps is approximately 10,000 square miles.
These Marines were from the 3rd Battalion, 7th Division, with their helipad near China, airlifted to LZ Oak near the An Kee River. These men were to be a blocking force behind a retreating BC battalion, as another Marine force was making a frontal assault from the coast. This was the vertical envelopment doctrine in operation. As the chopper became a fixture in the way war was waged in there, every skirmish, every battle became an individual struggle for survival. The LZ was hot.
5 minutes! 5 minutes!
Besides gunships, the Marines had the jet hot pad at Chulai. Attack jets on L5's Triple Alert could respond in minutes to a call for an airstrike. This war was where you found it, or it found you. Danger didn't end when you came back from a hop or humping the hills and the boonies. Taking casualties became part of everyday life. After trying so hard to kill the enemy, now you tried just as hard to save lives. Distances and terrain were no guarantee of safety or survival for either side. You learned quickly that death and fear did not sleep in the Nam. Choppers were a definite advantage against the harsh and impassable countryside of Vietnam. From the soft ooze of the rice paddies to the canals and rivers, troops faced the near impossible task of moving through jungles so thick the foliage could tear the skin. In the steep hills and deep ravines, grunts would climb up or slip down, going forward at a snail's pace. The terrain seemed as hostile as the Viet Cong. Vines and plants wrapped around feet and equipment. To march even a few miles could take days. Giant trees blocked out the sun. It was darkness at noon, and behind every tree or vine might be the enemy, waiting for his advantage. Fatigue. Surprise. Pinned down from heavy fire, the Marines have run into a large enemy force. Too far away from their artillery fire base, the Marines called in an airstrike and gunships. Before the enemy can fade away into the jungle tunnels, the choppers attacked. They were truly the dogs of war. But the other dumb bastards died for their country, the saying went. Keep your own asses alive. A murderous fire was rained down on the enemy position, and soon the attack jets rolled in with their rockets and bombs. As reinforcements began to arrive, the airstrikes continued, covering their insertion and driving the enemy into cover. After the airstrike stopped, more reinforcements arrived and the dead and wounded were evacuated. As the enemy retreated, the Marines discovered some exposed tunnels that had been blasted by the bombing, including this one, over 260 feet long and 8 feet high. Some VC resisted and were killed. Many others surrendered. The tunnels were extensive and contained enough weapons to arm a VC battalion. They were blasted closed and the hooches burned. Today was a good day for those who lived, but tomorrow never knows. As Ho Chi Minh told the French in 1947, "You can kill 10 of my men for every one I kill of yours. But even at those odds, you will lose, and I will win." For the dead on both sides, the battle was over. For the survivors, tomorrow would be another day back in hell. The chopper could move in minutes over terrain that could take weeks to walk through, avoiding booby traps and mines. 28% of our dead and wounded were caused by these deadly traps. Almost a third of our total battle casualties. Troop resupply and reinforcing, infantry air assaults, equipment salvaging, repair, and air-ground fire support. All these crucial functions became the responsibility of the helicopter. In this war, the helicopter had become the jeep, the truck, soaring above land obstacles that would have immobilized ground vehicles. Helicopters were also the scouts. A key ingredient to locating and pinpointing enemy positions was the tactic known as Recon by fire. Fly low, blasting everything in front of you to pieces was one version. The other was to send in light helos like the Loach, teamed up with 2 gunships. Together known as pink teams, they would fly low over the ground or trees trying to draw enemy fire. When the VC invariably opened up, the gunships would strike quickly with rockets and machine guns. If the contact became more involved, pink teams would call in the troop-carrying slicks to land infantry and attack the revealed enemy positions. At Hill 875, a company from the Army's 4th Division ran into a sizable enemy force. Needing more than gunships, an airstrike was requested by the company commander before charging the hill. The NVA were well dug in and strongly fortified. Within minutes, the airstrike arrived. F-100 Super Sabre jets armed with napalm and F-4 Phantoms firing rockets were awesome in their destruction. To the grunts, they were a godsend. To the enemy, they were the beasts from hell. air support missions numbered almost 800 hops a day. Armed with Vulcan miniguns, they pounded the enemy positions. Along with the F-4 and the F-100 were other planes, like the B-57 and the A-1s, that could carry 750-pound bombs, napalm, and the rock-eye bombs. The F-100, with its high speed at low altitudes, was a widely used close air support platform because of its uncanny accuracy. After the airstrike had softened up enemy resistance, the 4th Division launched a frontal attack on the hill. The NVA and VC gave ground slowly. From nearby hilltops, the 4th Division fire bases started pounding away. Along with continuous airstrikes, artillery fire blasted at the NVA until the hill was taken. Despite the hello's flair for drama and excitement, it was the grunts who had to hump and dig the enemy out from wherever he was hiding. Walking in a monsoon, where it rains for months at a time, being sniped at, being killed, stepping on booby traps, catching jungle rot, getting devoured by leeches, humping the hills through humidity and heat that sucked the breath out of you. It was a walk where death lurked in the trees and waited underground. And then there were the tunnels. Tunnel rats explored the tunnels, exploding sections that they could find. These tunnel systems sometimes concealed a whole battalion of men and women, 600 people rooted inside the earth. With their dead and losses from capture, the VC fought on. Hundreds of kilometers of tunnels connected villages, districts, and even provinces. They contained living spaces, storage depots, ordnance production, hospitals, headquarters, a total environment. The tunnels and their incredible proliferation were not a grand design. It was the answer to modern warfare technology. Aircraft, bombs, artillery forced the VC to live and fight from underground. Ironically, by being forced underground to avoid the air mobile attack, the Viet Cong, and later the NVA, prolonged the war to the point of showing the U.S. that it would not win. underground tunnels were most numerous in the Iron Triangle, near Saigon. They stretched from the gates of Saigon to the Cambodian border. The tunnels were a dagger aimed at Saigon, providing cover for agents, sappers, supplies. Even though the Americans realized the importance of the area, they never became aware of the sheer size and complexity of the tunnel system. These tunnels had their history in the Vietnamese resistance to the Japanese and French invaders. By 1965, the original 48 kilometers of tunnels excavated during the war against the French had grown to 200 kilometers. However, the keys to a revolutionary war are in the resistance of its forces to the enemy attacks. Time, space, and cost mean nothing to a dedicated revolutionary. To the Vietnamese who had been fighting for independence for 35 years, first against the Japanese, and then the French, and finally the Americans, time was however long it would take. If they did not succeed, then their children would, or their grandchildren. The concept of air mobile assault was action. It was based on a rapid response with force to intelligence updates and a policy of attacking the VC whenever he was found. Near Chu Lai, Marines learned from VC prisoners and peasants that there were more VC in a small village several miles away. Acting on this information, the Marines moved quickly and a platoon was airlifted by an H-34 Seahorse chopper to a rice paddy field outside the village. As they close in on the enemy position, they are met by heavy small arms fire. The platoon pushes to the edge of the village, but the VC are well dug in and resist fiercely. They do not retreat. Pinned down, the platoon leader radioed for fire support from a nearby fire base. Under the deadly artillery shelling, the VC fire quickly faded. And once again, it's the grunts who made a frontal assault. Besides the well-known Huey gunship, the CH-46C Knight was used for Marine troop transport and resupply. Both the C Knight and the H-34 Seahorse were older models of helicopters and slow, but the Marines preferred them for their troop capacity and proven reliability. 37Cs were the early workhorses for salvaging equipment damaged in combat, but they were also old and slow. The newer CH-53 Sea Stallion was the largest, fastest, and most powerful heavy-lift chopper in the U.S. inventory. These big birds could carry 38 Marines or comparable heavy loads, whether it was patrolling a river or providing escort to a land convoy. The Marines carried out much the same mission as their Army counterparts: find the enemy and attack them, using all weapons at their command. The CH-46s earned their keep, and despite their operational age, they carried out the bulk of the Marine ground insertion missions. These included transporting their long-range recon units, who often had to be inserted quickly to avoid detection and to observe and report enemy activity and locations. Sometimes these small unit insertions could get hot, and very quickly. Marine Recon, like their alert counterparts in the Army or SEAL Navy teams, had to move constantly to avoid enemy detection. But sometimes it didn't work out, and then it was a real fight for your life. In addition to observation, teams used dogs, ambush, and took prisoners. in their quest for intelligence. Insertions were made on remote hilltops, in thick jungles, even onto the Ho Chi Minh Trail. If the helicopter was the VC nightmare, it was also their favorite and most important target, in the air or on the ground. There was no greater glory for a VC soldier than to shoot down a chopper of any kind. They were low and slow over the LZ, especially on extractions. A moment of truth for everyone on board. They were also the objects of artillery and sapper attacks in their bird cages on the ground. As the war went on, the enemy became better marksmen. There were other problems as well. Mechanical failures, navigation mistakes, using maps where coordinates could be off by miles. The men on the ground might be off on their position too. In a jungle, that could be fatal. Waterways could be confusing, and the VC loved to set a trap with live bait just to get a shot at the big prize. If they could shoot it down and strip it, they could make weapons from everything they scavenged. Nothing could ever be left behind for the enemy, not even soup cans. In war, everybody must pay a price to live and die. Another mission for the helicopter was the patrolling of the Mekong River and numerous canals and waterways. Along with patrol boats, U.S. Navy choppers provided air support to the river and ground operations aimed at disrupting these routes for the Viet Cong. With thick jungle right at the water's edge, VC ambushes could go undetected from a boat. From their high vantage point, the patrolling chopper could spot situations not visible from below. The Viet Cong also used the river to ship supplies and their wounded to various areas. Their strategy for hiding supplies was to sink the boats during daylight hours and wait for night to transport it. Operating from barrack ships moored in mid-river, the armored assault boats were supported by Navy Huey gunships from a squadron nicknamed the Sea Wolves, and were divided into two unit fire teams. The Mekong Delta is a flat, low-lying area that covers nearly a third of the South, being covered by rice paddy fields and swamps and intersected by numerous rivers and drainage canals. It was impassable to vehicles of any sort. The rivers were the key to the country. Nearly 90% of the usable communications were in the form of rivers and canals. The number of junks and small boats totaled over 50,000. Many were simply innocent fishermen. To separate those from VC smuggling was a near impossible task. The code name for this river patrol operation was Game Warden. And eventually there were 750 patrol craft working the waterways of South Vietnam. They relied on helo-cover and fire support to find and destroy the enemy. Often the boats would fire blindly into the thick cover and needed a Sea Wolf chopper to spot the problem from above. As the boats came under fire, gunships would be called in on a fire suppression run. Coming in low over the jungle, they could catch the VC by surprise before the enemy could disappear. Sometimes without the cover of jungle, retreating enemy were caught out in the open or using reeds lay underneath the water in the rice paddy fields. Although the VC continued to use the waterways, these deadly attacks from above made it safe only at night. Besides trying to intercept their supplies on the river, the other job for these APBs was to prevent the VC from withdrawing by water when the Marine units were attacking them. Using helicopters to airlift the Marines inland, the boats would be the anvil to the Marines' hammer as they pushed the VC to the river. Whenever possible, if the grunts took fire, choppers were called in as fire support. With the Door M60 guns, the 2.75-inch rockets, and the Vulcan miniguns, the resulting destruction on the target below was total and complete. Insertion under fire could be gut-wrenching, especially with several choppers landing at once. The reinforcements and ammo had to be unloaded. Then the wounded and the dead loaded up, and the choppers gone before Charlie could zero in on the LZ with his 81mm mortar. Survivor, there was always more war. First pinpoint the VC position. Load up. Launch. Lock and load. Insert the troops. Destroy the enemy. For the grunt, a numbing, relentless routine, boring, exhausting, savage, and terrifying. Kill, while the only way out is feet first in a body bag. Stay alive, homeboy. Run on instinct. Incoming. Booby traps, the dull thump of an AK-47. And when the moment gets near, your brains turn to water and pour out your ears. When you run into heavy contact, you call in a gunship and soak the area in fire. Get that air cab to bust caps on anything that moves down there. The chopper is the great equalizer. All it burns is gas and bullets. Save the flesh, man. Survive any way you can. Find Charlie and kill him before he kills you. And when the day is finally over, never mind about one day closer to home. Just thank God if you're alive and in one piece. At sea, the conditions of war demanded different requirements. Air-sea rescue is the primary duty of helicopters stationed on board aircraft carriers. The choppers also search for subs and lay mines. But in Vietnam, it was the air-ground air-sea rescue hops that made the Sea King or Jolly Green Giant such a welcome sight to the flyers that were rescued. The Navy's main objective was the bombing of the North, and its F-4s and A-4s flew continually, along with the A-7s and the F-8s. The danger of being shot down was always possible, and many aircraft were lost. To the air crews, being captured or dying of exposure was not a pleasant thought. These big rescue choppers saved hundreds of men, many of them wounded or injured, from capture and drowning, often flying into enemy fire to do so. This film is an actual air-sea rescue of an A-4 pilot off the coast of North Vietnam. These rescue choppers were always in the air, and many times arrived on the scene in minutes. There was one major innovation which truly made the chopper seem an angel of mercy: the dust-off. Used as flying ambulances, they saved lives, getting the wounded to the hospitals fast. Called medevacs, these choppers were one of the main factors in giving a wounded man a better chance for survival than in past wars. Most of the time, the medical slicks were escorted by a gunship. Traveling in pairs, the gunship would give covering fire while the slick would descend for the pickup. A hairy few minutes of exposure while the litter bearers carried the wounded into the open. Many times the wounded man was back on the ground and being attended to within minutes. These dust-off medevac crews flew into every dangerous situation imaginable and saved many lives. Unarmed, low and slow, the risk was enormous every time. The enemy had a fat target during these moments, and coming into a hot LZ was never cake. At any moment you could stop a bullet, addressed to whom it may concern. Like a fireman waiting for a call, these units were constantly on alert. From a fatality rate of 5.5% for battle-wounded men in World War I, the rate dropped to under 2% in Vietnam.
Let me have your arm. Good. Relax all you can here. Put it a little bit. Lay down. Lay down. It's okay, Cody. That's what the pain is now. You're all right. Oh, my God.
The thumping sound of the chopper's engine was like music to the men below. The birds represented survival, victory, reinforcements, extraction. To the enemy, the chopper meant discovery, surprise, attack, danger. Americans could travel 100 miles in less than an hour and be fresh, ready for a fight. It is a bitter irony that this initial mobility, firepower, and surprise forced the enemy to give up their larger-scale military operations and revert to the smaller actions in tunnel warfare. This gave the enemy the ability to retain the initiative and adjust the level of combat to the available manpower and munitions. Stalemate. The communist forces did not have to defeat their enemy in a classical military sense. They had only to avoid defeat themselves while inflicting losses on their American foe. This story of chopper wars would be incomplete without mentioning the most famous air mobile division, the 1st Air Cav. Located at An-Ki in the Central Highlands, with over 16,000 men and 468 helicopters, the 1st Air Cav was the first division totally dedicated to being air mobile. With a cleared strip of land over 100 meters wide as a fire zone buffer, and a dug-in artillery and infantry positions inside the camp, the base at An-Ki resembled a huge, circled wagon train. Their AO stretched from the Cambodian border eastward to the China Sea, and 150 miles north to south in the northern section of 2 Corps. The 1st Air Cav was based in Indian country, having long ago turned in their horses. The troops rode choppers. Quick-firing howitzers, airlifted to faraway combat zones, were complemented by gunship rockets and heavy machine guns. A flying rock and roll party of fire and destruction with the enemy as the dance floor. This division laid the groundwork in the war's first major engagement, the Pleiku campaign. A full NBA division was geared up for a major offensive eastward, driving through Pleiku to the China Sea, cutting Vietnam in half. This intelligence came from a Green Beret camp near Playmay. This attack began on October the 13th, 1965, when the NBA 33rd Division besieged the outpost at Playmay. But it was only a feint. The real objective was to lure the ARVN troops into sending a rescue force overland. They were then ambushed along the line of march and pinned down. It was now October 24th. The South Vietnamese fought back strongly despite the surprise, and were able to hold out while the Air Cav saddled up and launched the first major infantry attack by chopper forces in the history of modern war. The Battle of the Ia Drang Valley had begun. The air assault infantry was inserted into the area to secure and set up LZ Field Goal for an artillery fire base. Sent from Pleiku, the troops landed their artillery and began supporting the breakout of the ARVN troops and later their advance to Playmay. At the same time, another artillery battery began shelling the NBA forces surrounding the original Green Beret force at Playmay. Under this intense barrage, the NVA retreated to the west, and the siege was broken. Immediately, the Air Cav launched a counteroffensive west of Playmay, seeking out the retreating enemy to prevent future attacks. Infantry battalions were airlifted deep into Indian country, the heart of the NVA stronghold. Dispersed over several LZs, they searched for the enemy. On November the 1st, they found them. The 1st Air Cav attacked and overran an enemy outpost on the Yate River. Suddenly, a full-scale battle erupted when the NVA sent a battalion of men against less than a full rifle company. A 5-to-1 advantage, with the troop carrying slicks bringing in a constant flow of ammo and reinforcements, supported by the fire base still at LZ Field Goal. Repeated airstrikes and chopper aerial bombardment, the NVA retreated to their base camp at Anta Village in the Ia Drang Valley. The NVA offensive had stalled, and now the choppers again led the push westward in the relentless counterattack on the enemy. As part of their air assault, a battalion of troops was airlifted into a remote clearing named LZ X-Ray, deep in the heart of the Ia Drang, and at the foot of the mountains called Chu Pang Massif, the bastion of the NVA. The enemy, now reinforced, made another all-out attack on the X-Ray defenders, hoping for a big military victory and making X-Ray into an American DMB-in fool. 1st Air Cav fought well. Although outnumbered and despite small units being cut off and forced to fight alone, the intensity of the NVA attack was fierce. Mobile artillery was choppered into place, and American firepower was brought to bear. Under constant and deadly shelling from artillery and blasted by gunship attacks and airplanes carrying napalm, the NVA was smothered under a curtain of fire he didn't expect and had never experienced. But the Yadrang battle wasn't over. Our troops paid for the victory in blood as always, but the enemy losses were staggering. Blood was the only currency in Vietnam for victories or defeats. B-52s were being called in to make a raid on the area. These raids were nicknamed aerial excavations, and all friendlies had to hump out of there. The X-ray troops were now ordered to march overland to 2 LZs. The Columbus-bound column made it without trouble, but the grunts heading for Albany ran headlong into another enemy group, trying to surprise the air mobile artillery at LZ Columbus. A nasty firefight followed. Again, the American firepower overwhelmed the attackers, and by November the 24th, the enemy was abandoning its camps in the Yadrang Valley and the Chupang Massif. Left behind were almost 2,000 dead and captured, plus huge amounts of supplies and weapons. The Battle of the Yadrang lasted 1 month. Its effect was profound and long-lasting. But there was more to this war than firepower. Although the Americans inflicted grievous losses on the enemy forces through the advantage of firepower and mobility, the enemy won by not losing. They prevented their own defeat by stalemating the American effort. Combat experience refined the chopper battle techniques and operations. The weight of the mobile artillery was reduced by 1,200 pounds. The choppers themselves were modified by installing collapsible fuel bladders holding 500 gallons of gas. Less weight meant longer range and more speed. As these and other lessons refined tactics for air support, the chopper continually made it easier for its own troops and created incredible hardships for its enemies. The VC lost so many men that after 1969, they ceased to be an effective military entity. But the fighting would remain bitter, and heavy losses on both sides grew as the NVA continued to supply and reinforce their divisions in the South. Without increasing the U.S. commitment, already at over 500,000 people, there could be no classic military victory. The Vietnamese communists were dedicated, hard-fighting soldiers with good military leaders and a strategy that neutralized the tactics of the American forces. Their perseverance in the face of such overwhelming firepower was respected by their American opponents. Their losses in military personnel were staggering. By their own admission, the communist side lost over 600,000 military casualties killed. The U.S. over 58,000. Whether the military should have been committed into Vietnam or not, with the limited rules of engagement that it functioned under, will be debated for years to come. But the tactical use of the helicopter is not to be disputed. Neither is the fighting ability of our military. The American soldiers, Marines, and sailors fought courageously, inflicting grievous injuries to the enemy. The chopper proved itself reliable and tough, adaptable and powerful. and has become a mainstay of American combat tactics. A classic military weapon, this machine helped win many victories, using mobility to achieve surprise, firepower to overcome the odds. It is a final irony that this weapon also saved thousands of lives. To the men who flew in them, and to those who fought against them, Vietnam will always be remembered as the first Chopper War. God willing, it will be the last.